Thank you to the organisers, and thank you for coming out tonight to hear about this time. And I'm to talk to this pamphlet, copies of which are available at the back for when you leave, which is the statement by New Zealand doctors and nurses about the need to change New Zealand drinking culture. As mentioned, I'm Dean of the Medical School in Christchurch. We're involved with education and research. And sometimes I like to say that the Canterbury District Health Board is responsible for today's health service, and the role of the university is to think about tomorrow's health service. The Dean described the cathedral as the heart and soul of Christchurch. I have often described our medical school as the heart and the mind of health research for New Zealand. Despite being a Cantabrian and having born here and lived here all my life, and if asked how long have you lived in Christchurch all your life, I usually reply not yet. But very proud of the activities of the University of Otago that's been my employer for many years in recent years. Firstly, I think we must thank the work done by Professor Doug Selman and Professor Jenny Connor in the Department of Public Health in Dunedin for putting together all the information for the people of New Zealand about the need for alcohol action in New Zealand and the need to change our heavy drinking culture. I was delighted when Doug asked me to be one of the initial signatories in the doctors and nurses statement. But what's even more amazing about this, in my career in medicine, doctors and nurses have never agreed on anything, particularly if a statement is provided, and the number who responded and said, yes, we will sign up to that, I think is a statement of how strongly New Zealand doctors and nurses feel about the extent to which alcohol is a major health issue. Also, I'm pleased that the university has already stopped alcohol companies sponsoring activities on University of Otago premises and of sponsoring student events over the last 12 months as part of intermediate steps between individual responsibility and what institutions need to do and what government need to do. And I'm also pleased that just in recent times, Harleen Hain. Now, Harleen is Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research. She's a developmental psychologist by background and fully understands the issues of the developing brain and how that impacts on behaviour. But she, in conjunction with Jenny Connor, are to lead a task force within the university aimed at changing the drinking culture in the University of Otago. How do we change student behaviour related to drinking? So we will look forward with interest to the recommendations they develop. Going back, I'm also very proud that the medical school in Christchurch, because of early influence of Doug Selman, was really the first medical school in New Zealand to introduce substantial teaching about alcohol and addictions to the clinical medical students as they were undertaking their clinical training. Reducing harm due to alcohol has got to involve a whole range of strategies. And as part of that, we must change the culture of alcohol within the New Zealand context. Some of this could well be education and individual responsibility. But as someone who spent a life in education, it has been very disappointing to me how little data supports the effectiveness of health education, whether it's on alcohol, whether it's on smoking, or whether it's on suicide. Virtually every study on all these health behaviours has shown education alone does not work. You've got to create other frameworks if you're going to influence human behaviour beyond education. We also know that part of the major problems caused by alcohol is alcohol into developing brains. Doug Selman highlighted the unborn child, but the adolescent and young adult brain is still developing. We still haven't got all our control mechanisms in place, and yet that's the time when we're exposing many of our young people to neurotoxic doses of alcohol. So part of the change has to be by regulation, and that's a key part of the 5+ solution that Doug Sims talked about and which is highlighted in this book, which is available at the back. I've always considered myself a floating voter who couldn't believe in any of the political parties because I wouldn't trust any of them. But I think alcohol is a political issue, and I think we should all be asking our MPs of whatever party what their party stands for on the alcohol forum. I would suggest that in New Zealand we never actually vote governments in, we usually vote the last government out. And I would suggest you ask members of government how they are going to respond to the recommendations provided by Sir Geoffrey Palmer and say we will not vote you to stay in power if the current legislation is not changed to reflect some of the recommendations made by Sir Geoffrey Palmer. I think also from the doctors and nurses, the fact that we got such agreement and so many people so rapidly signed up to the statement, I suggest the doctors and nurses of New Zealand need to continue to push the issue that problems due to alcohol is, in part, a political problem, and we need to be putting pressure on, as professions, as individuals, as members of communities, that the legislation must change within which we can enjoy some alcohol. Thank you very much.